He was a billionaire hiding as a nobody. She was an heiress pretending to be broke. Their lies created the perfect love, until they realized they were sworn enemies. The sterile chill of Cassian Blackwood's penthouse wasn't just temperature, it was metaphysical. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a glittering metropolis, a kingdom he'd built brick by algorithmic brick with Blackwood biotech. Yet, standing amidst the curated minimalism, a single, achingly expensive sculpture, the only concession to non-function, Cassian felt the walls constrict. The silence hummed with the phantom echoes of boardroom arguments, the relentless ping of crisis alerts, and the crushing weight of Project Chimera. Chimera, a gene-editing breakthrough poised to revolutionize organ regeneration, also an ethical minefield currently detonating on the front pages. Regulatory hurdles felt like brick walls, competitor whispers turned to shouted accusations of playing God, and the stock price. Cassian didn't need the blinking red numbers on his silent dark monitor to feel the plummet. It was a physical pressure on his sternum, a familiar ache of isolation magnified tenfold. He ran a hand through perpetually tousled dark hair, his usually sharp gray eyes dulled by exhaustion and a deeper, more profound loneliness. Human connection was a language he'd never truly mastered, relegated to transactional exchanges or the wary deference his position demanded. Enough. The thought slammed into him, quiet yet final. Not a shout but the snapping of a taut wire. He picked up a sleek encrypted phone, bypassing his usual channels. "Miles," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Handle everything. Chimera, the board, the vultures, everything. I'm unavailable. Indefinitely." "Cassian? What? Where are you going? The emergency meeting is in—" Miles Thorne's voice, perpetually frayed at the edges, crackled with panic. "Handle it, Miles." Cassian's tone brooked no argument, a familiar steel returning briefly. "I've transferred emergency protocols. Do not contact me. I'll be unreachable." He ended the call before Miles could splutter further, the silence rushing back in, now charged with possibility instead of dread. He moved with sudden, decisive energy. From a concealed safe, he retrieved a pre-packed duffel bag, durable, nondescript. Inside, clothes chosen for anonymity, well-made but deliberately bland chinos, soft cotton shirts in muted colors, a practical jacket, no bespoke suits, no monogrammed cufflinks. He slipped a passport into an inner pocket. Calvin Reed. The photo showed a slightly softer version of himself, the intensity dialed down. Calvin Reed, beneficiary of a modest family trust, seeking peace, not power. Untraceable funds had secured a month at Solara Springs, an exclusive wellness retreat nestled deep in the Cascade Mountains. A sanctuary promising digital detox, natural immersion, and anonymity. Exactly the sterile world's antithesis. Cassian, for the first time in years, felt a flicker of something akin to hope. He vanished into the city's pulse, leaving the sterile cage behind. The air in the Finch Industries penthouse was thick with the cloying scent of forced lilies and impending doom. Elara Finch stood ramrod straight before a floor-length mirror, draped in a gown that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Diamond droplets hung heavily from her ears, cold against her skin. Her reflection showed perfection. Sculpted cheekbones, artfully arranged auburn hair, eyes a startling green. But the eyes were flat, the carefully painted lips set in a grim line. She felt like a mannequin being dressed for auction. "Stand still, Elara," Victoria Finch commanded, her voice like ice chips clinking in a crystal glass. She adjusted a non-existent wrinkle on Elara's shoulder, her own reflection radiating steely control. "Arthur expects perfection tonight. This dinner is crucial. Arthur Vanth." The name tasted like ash. Ambitious, politically connected, and viewing Elara not as a person, but as the glittering final piece in his empire-building puzzle. Their engagement was a merger, pure and simple, orchestrated by Victoria to cement Finch Industries' dominance. His touch was possessive, his compliments transactional, his eyes calculating her worth. The gilded cage was closing in, the walls adorned with expectations and duty. Arthur himself appeared in the doorway, impeccably tailored, a shark smile playing on his lips. "Radiant as always, my dear," he said, stepping close. His hand settled possessively on the small of her back, sending a shiver of revulsion through her. "Ready to charm the regulators? Your presence is invaluable leverage." Elara forced a smile, brittle as spun sugar. "Of course, Arthur." Inside, rebellion screamed. Leverage, that's all she was. A pawn, a beautifully dressed asset. The suffocation was absolute. She caught her own gaze in the mirror again. Not the heiress, but the trapped animal behind the perfect facade. Later, amidst the clatter of silverware and the drone of power talk, Elara excused herself to freshen up. In the marble expanse of the guest bathroom, she leaned against the cool sink, breathing rapidly. Now or never. Her escape plan, meticulously crafted over months, relied on old trusted contacts from a brief, rebellious stint backpacking through Southeast Asia. A burner phone, hidden in her clutch, buzzed once. A single word, go. Heart hammering against her ribs, Elara didn't hesitate. A concealed service elevator, a prepaid cab idling in the delivery bay, a quick change in a deserted public restroom into worn jeans, a flowing linen tunic, and sturdy boots. The diamonds were left in the sink, a final defiant statement. In her pocket was another passport, Elle Rivers. The photo showed her smiling, genuinely, hair windswept, eyes alight with a freedom she hadn't felt in years. Elle Rivers, qualified yoga instructor, nomadic spirit, seeking temporary sanctuary and work. Her contact had secured her a last-minute staff position at Solara Springs. She slipped into the night, the city lights blurring as the cab sped towards the mountains, leaving the gilded prison far below. Freedom tasted like crisp, pine-scented air. Solara Springs wasn't just a location, it was an experience meticulously woven into a remote mountain valley. Calvin, stepped out of the discreet electric shuttle, the sheer scale of the silence hitting him first. Not empty silence, but a profound, living quiet punctuated by birdsong and the distant rush of water. Towering evergreens reached for a sky impossibly blue. The air, thin and crisp, carried the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and something sweet and floral. The architecture blended seamlessly. Low-slung buildings of warm timber and stone, expansive windows framing breathtaking vistas. No screens, no visible tech, just an overwhelming sense of natural immersion. Calvin felt the knot in his shoulders loosen infinitesimally. He was acutely aware of his own performance. He consciously relaxed his posture, softened his usually intense gaze, tried to mimic the slightly bewildered affability he associated with normal, wealthy people on vacation. He noted the other guests. Serene-looking women in expensive linen, silver-haired men with calm demeanors, and the staff moving with quiet efficiency. One figure caught his eye, a woman leading a small group towards the main lodge. She moved with an innate grace, her auburn hair catching the sun in a loose braid, her laughter as clear as the mountain stream. She wore simple staff attire but radiated a vibrant energy. Elle Rivers, his orientation packet had mentioned, one of the yoga and mindfulness instructors. He catalogued her. Attractive, obviously at ease in this environment, probably viewing guests like him as slightly ridiculous city dwellers seeking a quick spiritual fix. Harmless. He looked away, focusing on finding his cabin. Elara, Elle, guided her small group of jet-lagged executives towards deep breathing exercises, her voice calm, her smile effortless. It was a mask, carefully maintained. Inside, the adrenaline of her escape still thrummed, mixed with the gnawing anxiety of discovery. She scanned the new arrivals out of habit, a skill honed in countless high society functions. Her gaze snagged on a man standing alone near the shuttle drop-off. Tall, broad-shouldered, but holding himself with an unnatural stiffness. Expensive, understated clothes, the uniform of quiet wealth. His face was interesting, sharp planes and intelligent gray eyes, currently surveying the scene with an intensity that seemed out of place. Awkward, sad even. Just another Calvin, she thought dismissively, using the generic term she'd coined for the well-meaning but emotionally disconnected wealthy guests. Trust fund beneficiary, she guessed, mentally slotting him away. Seeking something he won't find in a week. She turned her brightest, most authentic Elle smile back to her students, pushing the real Elara Finch deeper into hiding. The mandatory digital detox authentic connection circle felt like a form of slow torture to Calvin. Guests and some senior staff sat on comfortable cushions in a sun-dappled grove. The facilitator spoke earnestly about presence and vulnerability. Calvin shifted, feeling exposed. His gaze drifted, landing inevitably on Elle Rivers. She sat cross-legged, posture effortlessly perfect, radiating a calm that seemed genuine. She caught him looking and offered a small, encouraging smile. He quickly looked down at his hands. During a break where participants were encouraged to mingle authentically, Calvin found himself hovering near a display of native plants. He stared at a particularly vibrant cluster of purple flowers, trying to recall the information from the retreat's botanical guide. Lupine, he stated, more to himself than anyone, the word sounding overly formal in the relaxed setting. A soft chuckle beside him. Elle. Close, she said, her voice warm. That's monkshood, aconitum. Beautiful, but famously toxic. She pointed to a different, less showy plant nearby. That's lupine. See the different leaf structure? Calvin flushed, the awkwardness he usually felt around attractive women amplified tenfold. Right, monkshood, poisonous, got it. He grimaced. Not exactly the harmony with nature vibe I was aiming for. Elle laughed again, a genuine sound that seemed to startle even her slightly. Harmony includes understanding the dangers, doesn't it? The thorns with the rose? She tilted her head, studying him. You seem genuinely perplexed by all this, not just going through the motions. Her directness disarmed him. Calvin, drawing on Cassian's analytical mind but filtering it through Calvin's assumed vulnerability, found himself speaking with unusual honesty. It's overwhelming. The quiet, the lack of structure. Back home it's all noise, pressure, managing, things. He gestured vaguely, almost knocking over a small informational sign. Family investments, he clarified hastily, sticking to the Calvin Reed script. Endless decisions, feels like drowning sometimes. I thought this place, maybe, he trailed off, feeling foolish. Elle's expression softened. She saw not just awkwardness, but a raw vulnerability beneath it. It resonated deeply with the trapped Elara within her. Drowning, she echoed quietly. I know that feeling, the weight of expectations. She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. That's why I live like this. No roots, just movement, freedom, teaching where the wind blows me. Solara is just a stopover. Next month, maybe Bali or the Andes. It was Elle Rivers' truth, carefully curated to hide Elara Finch's gilded chains. Sometimes you just have to shed the skin that doesn't fit anymore, Calvin. He looked at her, truly looked. Past the yoga instructor ease, he saw an intensity in her green eyes that mirrored something restless in himself. Her words about freedom, shedding skin, they spoke directly to the yearning buried beneath Cassian Blackwood's responsibilities. She saw his struggle, and instead of judgment, offered understanding wrapped in the allure of a life unburdened. Shedding skin, he repeated, a flicker of something like wonder in his eyes. That sounds terrifying and incredible. The conversation flowed, effortless and deep. They talked about the pressure of invisible burdens, the longing for simplicity, the suffocation of predefined roles. Calvin spoke of the loneliness of responsibility, carefully framed as managing complex family finances. Elle spoke of the exhilaration of anonymity and the open road, omitting the gilded cage she'd fled. Each confided a truth about their inner state, wrapped securely in the fabric of their lies. To Calvin, Elle embodied the untethered spirit he craved. To Elle, Calvin represented the sensitive soul trapped by circumstance, yearning to break free, just like her. The irony was absolute, yet invisible to them both. They found, in the other's carefully constructed fiction, a reflection of their deepest, most authentic desires. Over the following days, Solara Springs became a shared dreamscape. Guided hikes led by Elle became Calvin's highlights. He'd point out a bird, correctly identified now thanks to her patient tutelage, and she'd laugh, the sound echoing off the granite peaks. He'd surprise her with quiet observations about the geology of a rock face, the analytical Cassian peeking through Calvin's affable mask in ways she found unexpectedly charming. One afternoon they found a secluded meadow, a riot of wildflowers humming with bees. They sat in companionable silence, the only sound the wind rustling the grasses. It's easy to forget the real world exists here, Calvin murmured, lying back, shielding his eyes from the sun. The constant negotiation. Back home, every conversation feels like a chess game, calculating moves, anticipating threats. He sighed, the sound heavy with a weariness that felt genuine, even if the source was misrepresented. Just managing the expectations, the constant decisions, it drains you. Elle plucked a blade of grass, twirling it thoughtfully. She saw the weight on him, the loneliness he couldn't quite hide. It mirrored her own hidden struggle. Chess games, she mused. I left that board behind, deliberately. She turned to him, her green eyes serious. My life, Elle's life, it's about fluidity, no 5-year plans, no dynastic expectations, just experience, connection. She gestured around the meadow. Like this, real, unscripted. It's terrifying sometimes, having nothing solid to hold on to, but it's also pure, no masks. Calvin turned his head to look at her. The sunlight caught the gold in her hair, the sincerity in her face. He believed her utterly. Elle Rivers, penniless, free-spirited yogi, living authentically without the burdens he described. She represented everything Cassian Blackwood couldn't have, everything Calvin Reed pretended to escape. No masks, he echoed, a pang of guilt twisting in his gut, quickly buried. That sounds like the only way to truly breathe. He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing hers. A spark, undeniable. Neither pulled away. Under a canopy of stars so dense it felt like drowning in diamonds, their connection deepened. Away from the structured activities, they'd steal moments on a viewing platform. Cassian, whose mind usually raced with complex algorithms, found himself silenced by the universe's grandeur. Elara, who navigated social complexities with practiced ease, found herself simply listening to Calvin's quiet, insightful observations about constellations, his voice laced with a wonder that felt disarmingly real. One such night, shoulders touching against the cool stone railing, the intimacy became palpable. "I never expected this," Calvin confessed, his voice low, rough with emotion. "To feel seen like this. You make the noise stop, Elle." Elara's breath hitched. Seen, that was the heart of it. Not as Elara Finch, the valuable heiress, but as Elle, the woman who loved wild places and hated cages. He saw her, the self she desperately wanted to be. She turned to him. The starlight illuminated the earnestness in his gray eyes, the vulnerability beneath the lingering awkwardness. It mirrored the yearning in her own soul. "I feel it too," she whispered, the admission terrifying and exhilarating. "Like I can finally breathe. Like you're the only real thing in this whole performance." The irony of her own words was lost in the intensity of the moment. The kiss wasn't planned. It was a gravitational pull. Awkward at first, a gentle collision of lips, then deepening with a shared hunger that surprised them both. It was tentative, searching, then filled with a raw, desperate need that bypassed thought. The cool mountain air vanished, replaced by the heat of skin, the taste of shared secrets yet unspoken, the dizzying sensation of falling while feeling utterly anchored. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, foreheads resting together, the world had shifted. The carefully constructed personas of Calvin Reed and Elle Rivers held them. But beneath the masquerade, Cassian Blackwood and Elara Finch had found something terrifyingly, beautifully real. The idol was complete, fragile, and blissfully ignorant of the worlds poised to shatter it. Solaris Springs ceased to be just a location. It became a shared, sun-drenched universe governed by stolen moments and the intoxicating rhythm of their double lives. Cassian, inhabiting Calvin with increasing ease, found a liberation he hadn't known existed. The rigid posture of Blackwood Biotech's CEO melted into genuine relaxation. He laughed more readily, a rusty but warm sound that surprised even him. He tentatively exchanged pleasantries with other guests, finding the mundane chatter less burdensome, filtered through the lens of knowing Elle waited nearby. His sharp mind, usually dissecting market trends or genetic sequences, now focused on the intricate pattern of a butterfly's wing, the subtle shift in Elle's expression when she was amused, the perfect curve of her smile in the morning light. Elara, as Elle, felt the constricting bands of Elara Finch loosen daily. The performance of the carefree yogi became less a mask and more a skin she desperately wished was real. With Calvin, she didn't have to calculate her words for political impact or measure her laughter for propriety. She could be loud, opinionated about the best hiking trails, messy after a sudden downpour caught them on a ridge, genuinely silly during an impromptu mud mask session in her tiny staff cabin. He didn't flinch. He joined in, his initial awkwardness transforming into an endearing, clumsy enthusiasm. He saw her, or rather, he saw the her she longed to be, unburdened, spirited, authentic. It was a heady, dangerous freedom. Their connection deepened in the quiet spaces between structured retreat activities. One afternoon they discovered a hidden grove carpeted in wild lavender, the air thick with its drowsy scent. Lying side by side, fingers loosely intertwined, the silence was companionable, profound. "It's strange," Calvin murmured, tracing a pattern on her palm with his thumb, a gesture that sent shivers through her. "I feel more myself here, with you, pretending to be someone else, than I ever do as who I really am back home." The truth of it resonated deep within Cassian. Calvin was a part of him, buried beneath layers of responsibility and isolation. The pressure, managing the family legacy. It's like living in a gilded cage, beautiful to look at, suffocating to inhabit. He used the words deliberately, echoing her earlier sentiment about freedom, reinforcing the Calvin Reed narrative. Elara turned her head, her green eyes searching his face. She saw the sincerity etched there, the vulnerability he didn't hide from her. It mirrored her own trapped existence perfectly. "A cage," she breathed, the word tasting bitter. "I know that feeling intimately. That's why Elle runs, why she chooses the open sky, the unknown road. No dynasties, no expectations weighing her down like stones." She squeezed his hand. "Seeing you, Calvin, wrestling with your cage, wanting to break free, it makes me believe it's possible. For anyone." The irony was a live wire humming between them, unseen. He saw her nomadic freedom as salvation. She saw his gilded burden as a shared prison. Each reinforced the other's carefully constructed lie, mistaking it for profound understanding. Under the velvet expanse of the night sky, perched on the familiar viewing platform, their bond deepened further. Cassian pointed out Cassiopeia, his voice low and steady, explaining the mythology. Elara rested her head on his shoulder, the solid warmth of him anchoring her amidst the dizzying stars. She told him fragmented, adapted stories of her travels. A festival in India became a backpacker's anecdote, a near miss in the Andes, a thrilling tale of resilience. He listened, rapt, seeing only the adventurous spirit of Elle, not the carefully curated fragments designed to hide the heiress. One such night, the air cool and charged, the intimacy became overwhelming. They stood facing each other, the Milky Way, a river of light above them. "I keep waiting to wake up," Calvin confessed, his gray eyes serious in the starlight. "This feels impossible, too good. Finding someone who understands the weight, who makes the noise just stop." He cupped her face, his touch tentative yet possessive. "You see me, Elle, not the expectations, not the cage, just me." Tears pricked Elara's eyes. Just me, that was the crux of it. Not Elara Finch, the trophy, the asset. Just Elle, the woman Calvin saw, free, authentic, real, was the self she desperately clung to. "I do see you," she whispered, her voice thick. "And what I see, it terrifies me how much I feel." She leaned into his touch. "It's like finding an anchor in the middle of the ocean I chose to sail. Unexpected, essential." She kissed him then. Not the tentative kiss of their first, but a deep, claiming press of lips, pouring all her tangled hope and fear into it. He responded in kind. The kiss a silent vow exchanged between Calvin and Elle, blissfully unaware of the tectonic plates shifting beneath their feet. The intrusion was as jarring as shattering glass. Cassian was returning from an early morning meditation session led by Elle, a rare sense of peace settling over him, when he saw the familiar, harried figure lurking near the organic herb garden. Miles Thorne, attempting to look inconspicuous in khakis and a polo shirt that screamed "City," clutched a cardboard box labeled "Artisanal Honey, Urgent Guest Delivery." His face was pale, etched with deep lines of stress. "Sir!" Miles hissed, darting forward as Cassian approached, deliberately avoiding his real name. "Thank God, I've been trying to find a way in for hours. They're militant about the digital detox." Calvin's sense of peace evaporated instantly. The CEO's mask slammed back into place, his gray eyes turning flinty. "Miles, what part of unavailable and do not contact was unclear?" His voice was low, dangerous. "It's Chimera, sir," Miles whispered urgently, glancing around. "Disaster, catastrophic sabotage. Someone leaked the preliminary trial data, the unredacted version with the ambiguous primate cognition results. It's all over the financial networks, the scientific journals, everywhere. Blackwood plays God, ethical nightmare. The stock." Miles swallowed hard. "It's down 40% in pre-market. The board is in full-blown panic. Vanderkamp is calling for your immediate resignation." And the whispers. He lowered his voice further. "The leaks point squarely to a Finch Industries subsidiary, Axiom Labs. They've been sniffing around our IP for months." The words hit Cassian like physical blows. Chimera, his life's work, the project burdened with both immense promise and profound ethical weight, now twisted into a weapon against him. Finch, the rival empire. The cage door slammed shut. The crushing weight of his real world descended, suffocating the fragile freedom of Calvin Reed. He felt the familiar constriction in his chest, the cold calculation flooding his mind. Damage control? Cassian's voice was stripped of Calvin's warmth, pure Blackwood steel. "Imploding, sir. Legal is scrambling. PR is drowning. We need you, now. The emergency board call is in 3 hours. Your jet is refueling and will be at the nearest private airfield in 90 minutes. Miles shoved the honey box into Cassian's hands. "Credentials, a clean phone, cash. Don't use the retreat comms." Cassian took the box, its weight symbolic. Calvin Reed was evaporating. 90 minutes, he confirmed, the words tasting like ash. The idyll was over. He looked towards the lodge, where Elle would be preparing for her morning yoga class. A sharp, unexpected pang of loss pierced through the professional fury. He had to tell her. He had to confess everything, before he left. He couldn't vanish like a ghost. He believed, desperately, that the connection they'd forged was strong enough to survive the revelation of Cassian Blackwood. She understood Cage's, maybe she'd understand his. The note was slipped under her staff cabin door during her sunrise yoga class. Thick, expensive parchment, sealed with a discreet monogram Elara recognized instantly. Her mother's. The retreat manager, a normally serene woman named Tanya, stood nearby, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes radiating uncomfortable sympathy. "Delivered by special courier Elle," Tanya said softly. "He was insistent." Elara's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Victoria Finch's handwriting was as cold and precise as the woman herself. "Elara, this childish escapade ends. Your presence at the Vanth residence for the final engagement dinner tonight is non-negotiable. Arthur is understandably displeased and suspicious. Return discreetly by 5 p.m. If you are not present, Arthur will be informed of your location and your little charade as Elle Rivers will be exposed to the management and guests of Solara Springs. Consider the consequences for your future. Freedom. Do not test me. Mother." A second note, on cheaper paper but no less threatening, was paperclipped underneath. Arthur's distinct, aggressive scrawl. "Playing games, Elara? Disappearing act noted. Return, now, or face the music. You won't enjoy the tune, eh?" The walls of her tiny cabin seemed to close in. The scent of lavender from a small bouquet on her desk, a gift from Calvin, suddenly felt cloying. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed up her throat. Exposed. Her carefully constructed refuge, her identity as Elle, the fragile connection with Calvin, all of it could be ripped away, publicly shredded. Arthur would make sure of it. He'd brand her unstable, unreliable, destroying any chance of independence. Victoria would lock her in a tighter cage than before. Tears blurred the harsh words on the page. She couldn't go back. Not yet. Not without telling Calvin. He'd become her anchor, her lifeline to the person she wanted to be. He understood the need to escape cages. She had to tell him the truth about Elara Finch, about the gilded prison she'd fled. She had to believe that the man who saw Elle would understand the desperation that birthed her. Maybe he'd even help? The thought was terrifying, reckless, but it bloomed amidst the panic. She had to confess, before she was dragged back. The serene atmosphere of Solara Springs curdled into a dissonant hum for both of them. Cassian moved through the motions of packing his meager Calvin belongings with grim efficiency, his mind already dissecting the Chimera sabotage, plotting countermoves, anticipating boardroom battles. The duffel bag felt heavier than before, laden with the weight of his real identity. He scribbled a note on retreat stationery, his hand uncharacteristically shaky. "Elle, need to talk. Urgently. Dawn. Hot Springs. Please. Calvin." He slipped it under her cabin door, his heart pounding with a fear alien to Cassian Blackwood, the fear of losing her when she learned the truth. Elara, meanwhile, moved through her afternoon yoga class like an automaton. Her instructions were rote, her smile brittle. She spotted Calvin across the dining hall during the silent lunch, his expression distant, troubled. Their eyes met, a jolt of shared anxiety passing between them. He gave a barely perceptible nod towards the door. She understood. The Hot Springs. Dawn. She managed a small, strained smile in return, her own panic mirrored in his eyes. He looked like a man facing execution. He feels it too, she thought desperately. The end of this bubble. He wants to tell me about his world, his cage. He trusts me. The thought fortified her. She would tell him. She had to. Before Victoria's ultimatum forced her hand, the final afternoon bled into evening, the retreat's peaceful rhythms feeling like a cruel parody. Cassian paced the confines of his cabin, rehearsing his confession in his head. "Elle, I'm not Calvin Reed. I'm Cassian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Biotech. I live in a gilded cage of my own making. I came here to escape, and found you." Would she understand? Would she see the man beneath the title, the man she'd connected with? Or would she only see the billionaire, the rival, the lie? Elara sat on her narrow bed, clutching the crumpled notes from her mother and Arthur. She practiced her own revelation. "Calvin, my name isn't Elle Rivers. I'm Elara Finch, heiress to Finch Industries. I ran from an arranged marriage, from a life that felt like a prison. I became Elle to breathe, and found you." Would he be horrified? Betrayed? Or would he, the man who hated his own gilded cage, see her desperation? Would he help her escape hers? Sleep was impossible. The night stretched, interminable, punctuated by the distant hoot of an owl and the frantic beating of their own hearts. The digital detox felt like a shared sentence, cutting them off from the worlds demanding their return, trapping them in the agonizing anticipation of their dawn meeting. The bubble was fracturing, the masks beginning to slip under the strain of impending truth. The peace of Solara Springs was gone, replaced by a charged silence thick with dread and desperate hope. The path to the secluded hot springs was shrouded in pre-dawn mist, the air damp and cold, smelling of pine and minerals. Cassian arrived first, the steam rising from the milky blue water the only movement in the gray light. He wore simple retreat clothes, the duffel bag at his feet a stark reminder of imminent departure. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the stillness. He paced the smooth stones, rehearsing his words one final time. Cassian Blackwood. The name felt like a lead weight, a soft footfall on the path. Elle. She emerged from the mist like a wraith, her face pale, eyes wide and shadowed. She wore her yoga instructor's clothes, a thin shawl pulled tight against the chill. Her gaze locked onto his, filled with the same turbulent anxiety he felt. Without a word, they moved towards each other. The embrace was desperate, clinging, a silent communication of shared fear and unspoken love. They held each other tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of the other, savoring the last moments of Calvin and Elle, of the beautiful, fragile lie. They pulled apart slightly, still holding each other's arms. The mist curled around them, isolating them in a private, fragile world. The silence stretched, heavy with the unspoken truth. Both took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling themselves for the plunge. Cassian spoke first, his voice rough with emotion, his gray eyes fixed on hers, pleading for understanding. Elle, I haven't been honest with you, not from the beginning. My name, it isn't Calvin Reed. He swallowed hard, the name he'd buried for weeks rising to the surface. I'm Cassian Blackwood. Simultaneously, propelled by the same desperate need for truth, Elara blurted out, her voice trembling. Calvin, I lied too. I'm not Elle Rivers. Her green eyes searched his face, begging him to see past the deception to the woman beneath. I'm Elara Finch. The names hung in the mist, shrouded air. Cassian Blackwood. Elara Finch. Not just names, not just identities, titles, legacies, rival empires. The silence that followed wasn't just absence of sound, it was a vacuum, sucking the air from their lungs, the warmth from their bodies. Recognition dawned not in slow realization, but in a brutal, instantaneous avalanche. Cassian's grip on her arms tightened involuntarily, then slackened as if burned. His expression, moments ago open and vulnerable, underwent a terrifying transformation. Shock, raw and absolute, froze his features. Then, like ice cracking, it shattered into dawning horror. The softness vanished, replaced by the flinty sharpness of the CEO. The man who saw her? He saw the heiress to the fortune actively trying to destroy his life's work. Finch? The word was a low, disbelieving rasp. Elara? Finch? Elara recoiled as if struck. The warmth in her eyes died, replaced by a mirroring horror that chilled her to the bone. The vulnerable, cage-bound man she thought she knew? He was Cassian Blackwood, the reclusive, ruthless genius whose cutting-edge biotech threatened her family's core holdings. The man whose company her family, through Arthur, had just sabotaged. Blackwood? She whispered, the name tasting like poison. You're Cassian Blackwood? The foundation of their relationship, the profound connection, the shared vulnerability, the belief in seeing each other's true selves, didn't just crumble, it vaporized. The beautiful sanctuary of Solace Springs, the haven they'd built together, imploded in that single devastating moment of mutual unmasking. The mist swirled around them, witnesses to the death of Calvin and Elle, and the brutal birth of Cassian and Elara, enemies bound by a love built on lies. The hot springs steamed, oblivious as the first, agonizing accusations began to fly. The names hung in the mist like shrapnel. The silence that followed was a physical thing, dense and suffocating, amplifying the frantic hammering of their hearts. The steam rising from the hot springs suddenly felt cloying, obscuring not the view, but the person they thought they knew. Recognition wasn't gradual, it was a brutal, instantaneous reconstruction. Every shared laugh, every whispered confidence, every tender touch was reinterpreted through the harsh lens of rivalry and betrayal. Cassian's hands, moments ago holding her with desperate affection, dropped from her arms as if scalded. The vulnerability in his gray eyes vanished, replaced by a glacial fury that Elara had never seen, not even in her coldest boardroom nightmares. The soft lines of Calvin Reed hardened into the sharp, forbidding angles of Cassian Blackwood, CEO. You spied on me, he accused, his voice a low, dangerous rasp devoid of Calvin's warmth. This whole time, Solace Springs, me, it was a Finch operation. Axiom Labs wasn't enough? You had to send the heiress in person to dig for weaknesses? The sabotage of Chimera, the plummeting stock, Miles's frantic report, it all coalesced into a single devastating narrative centered on the woman before him. Elara recoiled, the accusation hitting like a slap. The horror in her green eyes flared into defensive anger. Spied on you? she shot back, her voice trembling but gaining strength. You think us, was some corporate honey trap? Look at you, Cassian Blackwood, hiding here as some sad sack trust fund baby, playing vulnerable to lure me in? Did your board sign off on this tactic? Seduce the rival heiress for insider info? Her own family's ruthlessness, Arthur's machinations, suddenly seemed mirrored in the man she'd kissed under the stars. The hurt was a raw, bleeding wound beneath the fury. You sabotaged yourself to trap me? Don't be absurd, Cassian snapped, the CEO's icy control fracturing under the weight of her counter-accusation and the personal sting. I came here to escape the very world you represent. The cutthroat maneuvering, the ethical compromises, the cage. He spat the last word, throwing her own metaphor back at her. And I found this. He gestured wildly between them, encompassing the shattered illusion. A lie wrapped in another lie. Did you enjoy the performance, Elara? Playing the penniless, free spirit? Did you laugh at poor, awkward Calvin and his family investment woes? At least my cage is real, Elara fired back, tears of rage and humiliation welling. My performance was survival. What's yours? Billionaire boredom? Slumming it for kicks? Did you find authenticity in mocking someone you thought was beneath you? The foundation of their connection, the belief that they had seen each other's hidden, true selves, felt like the cruelest joke. Everything we said, everything we felt. Was it just part of the masquerade for you, too? The question hung in the air, sharp and agonizing. Cassian flinched, the raw pain beneath his fury momentarily visible. He thought of her laughter in the meadow, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she debated philosophy, the way she'd rested her head trustingly on his shoulder. Had that been performance? Could such vulnerability be faked? The doubt warred with the overwhelming evidence of her identity and the corporate attack. Was any of it real for you? He countered, his voice rough. The freedom you preached? The hatred of gilded cages? Or was that just a script to manipulate Calvin Reed? Elara stared at him, the man she'd thought understood her deepest yearning now looking at her with utter contempt. The person she'd revealed her soul to, as Elle, was Cassian Blackwood. The realization was a physical ache. I believed Calvin was real, she whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a crushing wave of grief. I believed in him, and he never existed. The raw despair in her voice, the utter devastation on her face, pierced through Cassian's anger. He saw, not the Finch heiress in that moment, but Elle, the woman who had made him feel seen, who had coaxed genuine laughter from him, who had kissed him with a desperate hunger that felt achingly real. The dissonance was excruciating. The idyll was not just over, it was poisoned. Before either could speak further, the outside world, held at bay for precious destructive minutes, crashed in. Cassian's burner phone, tucked in his pocket, vibrated with an insistent, urgent rhythm. Miles. Simultaneously, the distant chime of the retreat's main bell echoed through the valley, an unusual sound at dawn. Tanya, the retreat manager, appeared at the path's edge, her face pale and apologetic. Mr. Reed? Ms. Rivers? She called hesitantly through the mist. I'm so sorry to interrupt. There's urgent transport waiting for both of you at the main lodge. Immediately. The shared glance between Cassian and Elara was no longer one of lovers, nor even of enemies in that moment. It was the bleak look of prisoners being recalled to their cells. The mutual masquerade was over. The war had begun. Cassian Blackwood's return to Blackwood Biotech was a plunge into icy chaos. The sleek, minimalist headquarters thrummed with panic. Screens flashed red with plummeting stock prices. News channels on mute displayed damning headlines. Blackwood's chimera, scientific breakthrough, or ethical abyss. Finch Industries points finger at rival. Miles descended upon him the moment he stepped off the private elevator, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Thank God, Vanderkamp is mobilizing the board for an emergency vote. Your resignation is their opening demand. Axiom Labs is officially denying involvement, but the leaked data trail, it's circumstantial but damning. The media is crucifying us. Cassian shed the last vestiges of Calvin Reed like a discarded skin. His mind, honed by crisis, clicked into overdrive. Get legal on Chimera data integrity. Prove the leak wasn't internal. PR needs a counter-narrative now. Focus on Chimera's life-saving potential, the stringent ethical protocols we follow. And find me the source of that leak. I want proof, Miles. Hard proof linking it to Axiom, or Finch. He moved through the corridors, the deferential murmurs of employees laced with fear and uncertainty. The sterile environment, once his domain of control, now felt like a battlefield. He accessed encrypted files, dissected the leaked data, his brilliant mind isolating inconsistencies. And there it was, a subtle digital watermark, a signature he recognized from a failed joint venture proposal Finch had submitted years ago. Axiom Labs, a Finch subsidiary, was undeniably the source. The sabotage was real. Ordered by whom? Victoria Finch? Arthur Vanth? The image of Elara's devastated face at the hot springs flashed unbidden. Did she know? Was she part of it? The doubt was a corrosive whisper. Elara Finch's return was a grotesque parody of homecoming. The Vanth penthouse was a glittering cage for her engagement dinner. Arthur greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes, his hand gripping her elbow possessively. "Welcome back, darling. We missed you." The underlying threat was palpable. Victoria stood nearby, radiating glacial satisfaction. The dinner was an ordeal. Elara smiled, nodded, played the perfect heiress fiancée, while inside, she was numb. The faces of the powerful guests blurred. Arthur's hand on her knee under the table felt like a brand. The opulent food tasted like ash. She replayed the hot spring scene on a loop. Cassian's fury, his accusations, the death of Calvin and Elle. The pain was a constant throb, mixed with a simmering rage, at her mother, at Arthur, at the gilded trap of her life. Later, cornered by Arthur in a silk-draped alcove, the mask slipped. "Where were you, Elara?" he demanded, his voice low and venomous. "Playing yogi? How quaint! And who was the sad sack you were clinging to? Some trust fund loser seeking enlightenment?" His knowledge was terrifying. "It was an escape, Arthur," Elara said, forcing her voice level. "From this, from you." He laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Escape? Don't be naive. You belong here, with me. And your little retreat friend? Blackwood won't save you. He's finished. Chimera is toxic, his company is bleeding. Finch will pick over the carcass." He leaned closer, his breath hot on her ear. "And if you even think of running again, or contacting him, Solara Springs won't be the only place that learns about Elle Rivers. Your freedom, such as it is, ends. Permanently." His words confirmed Cassian's accusation. Arthur knew about the sabotage. He was proud of it. The ruthless ambition, the casual cruelty, it was his true nature laid bare. He saw Cassian as a threat, and Elara as a possession. The cage wasn't just gilded, it was owned by a monster. Back in his stark office, surrounded by screens displaying the carnage, Cassian couldn't purge Elara from his thoughts. Not Elara Finch, the heiress, but Elle, the woman who laughed freely, who challenged him on hikes, whose eyes held genuine wonder under the stars. He replayed moments, dissecting them with ruthless honesty. Her frustration with dynastic expectations, wasn't that the authentic cry of the trapped heiress? Her passion for freedom, wasn't that the core of her rebellion against Arthur and Victoria? The vulnerability she showed him, could that all have been acting? The Elle he knew felt fundamentally incompatible with the callous architect of Chimera's destruction. The dissonance was agonizing. Who did I connect with? The question haunted him. Was there a real Elara beneath the Finch armor, buried as deeply as Cassian was beneath Blackwood? Trapped at Arthur's side, paraded at events, Elara found herself doing the same. She thought of Calvin's awkward sincerity, his quiet intensity when discussing the stars, his unexpected flashes of humor, the genuine relaxation she'd seen blossom in him. The man burdened by managing family investments, wasn't that the authentic weight Cassian Blackwood carried? The yearning for simplicity, wasn't that the core of his escape to Solara? The vulnerability he showed her? Could that have been a calculated ploy? The Calvin she knew felt fundamentally incompatible with the image of the ruthless, manipulative billionaire Arthur described. Who did I fall for? The answer felt crucial, buried beneath layers of betrayal and corporate warfare. Cassian stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city he dominated but felt alienated from. He had a choice. Unleash the full fury of Blackwood biotech on Finch Industries, destroy Elara's world in retaliation, and retreat into the sterile isolation of vengeance. Or he could acknowledge the terrifying possibility that the connection, forged amidst lies, had touched something real in both of them, something worth salvaging from the wreckage. It meant embracing vulnerability, the very thing he'd run from. It meant trusting the ghost of Elle. Elara stared at her reflection in the penthouse window, the glittering cityscape a mockery of freedom. She had a choice. Submit to Arthur, become Victoria's heir in full, lock herself in the gilded cage permanently. Or she could risk everything, her reputation, her family's wrath, her fragile safety, for the ghost of Calvin, for the possibility that Cassian Blackwood contained a kernel of the man she'd loved. It meant an act of ultimate rebellion, not just against her family, but against the life scripted for her. It meant trusting the ghost of Cassian. Arthur Vanth, emboldened by Blackwood's perceived weakness and Elara's forced compliance, overplayed his hand. At a high-profile industry gala, microphone in hand, he made a grand, sanctimonious speech. While others chased scientific glory with reckless disregard for ethics, he boomed, casting a significant glance towards where Cassian stood, stone-faced. Finch Industries remains committed to responsible innovation. He paused for dramatic effect. We cannot, in good conscience, stand by while dangerous, inadequately vetted technologies like Project Chimera are pushed forward. Whistleblowers within Blackwood Biotech have revealed shocking lapses in protocol, potential data manipulation. He presented fabricated documents, expertly forged, to gasps from the audience. The public deserves truth. Regulation must intervene. It was a masterstroke intended to deliver the final blow, discredit Cassian utterly, and position Finch as the ethical savior. Cameras flashed. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Watching from the sidelines, flanked by Arthur's smug associates, Elara saw her moment. Arthur wasn't just ambitious, he was vindictive, ruthless, and willing to destroy anyone in his path, including her, if she ever truly defied him. He'd confirmed the sabotage, gloated about destroying Cassian. He'd threatened her freedom, and now he was using lies to finish the job. The man Cassian had accused her of being the manipulative Finch operative was actually Arthur. The realization was a lightning bolt. She excused herself, heart pounding, not towards the restroom, but towards a deserted service corridor. Pulling out a burner phone she'd secreted away, a relic from her Solara escape plan, she accessed a deeply buried encrypted file. Months ago, suspicious of Arthur's dealings with Axiom Labs, she'd used her fading tech contacts to dig. She'd found evidence. Arthur directing Axiom's head to acquire Chimera data by any means necessary, financial trails linking shell companies to the hackers, recordings of Arthur discussing the leak strategy to cripple Blackwood. Proof not just of corporate espionage, but of illegal hacking and conspiracy. Proof that implicated Arthur and Axiom, protecting only the highest echelons of Finch itself. For now, she hesitated for only a second, looking at a grainy photo on the phone, her and Calvin, laughing over terrible retreat coffee, a moment of unguarded joy. She thought of Cassian's devastated fury, the death of something beautiful. She thought of her own suffocating future with Arthur. This is for Elle, and for Calvin, and for whoever we really are. With trembling fingers, she anonymized the data packets. One, sent directly to Cassian Blackwood's most secure, private server, the one Miles had used for the honeybox credentials, the address seared into her memory. Another, blasted simultaneously to every major financial and news outlet she could access. She included a simple, untraceable message. The truth about Chimera, Arthur Vanth. Axiom Labs, corporate sabotage. Then she vanished the phone, slipped back into the gala, and met Arthur's triumphant gaze with a smile as cold as her mother's. The die was cast. Chaos erupted not minutes later. First, a murmur through the crowd as phones began buzzing incessantly, then gasps, shouts. News anchors on the gala's muted screens suddenly looked stunned, then frantic. Headlines shifted in real time. Shocking leak. Vanth orchestrated Chimera sabotage. Finch subsidiary implicated in illegal hack. Arthur Vanth. Allegations of fraud, conspiracy. Arthur's smug triumph evaporated, replaced by dawning horror and fury. He wheeled around, his eyes scanning the crowd, locking onto Elara. The accusation in his gaze was terrifying, but she held it, her green eyes defiant. Security moved towards him as journalists surged forward, shouting questions. Victoria Finch materialized beside Elara, her face a mask of icy rage, gripping her daughter's arm with bruising force. "What have you done?" she hissed, but it was lost in the bedlam. Cassian stood amidst the chaos, his own phone buzzing, a secure notification from Miles. "Sir, incoming data packet, source unknown. It's everything. Proof. Vanth, Axiom, we're clear." Cassian watched Arthur being escorted away by his own security, the man's reputation dissolving in a whirlwind of scandal. He saw Victoria Finch's steely composure crack, saw the calculating look she shot towards her daughter, and he saw Elara, standing tall amidst the ruins she'd created, her face pale but resolute, meeting his gaze across the crowded room. She'd burned her own family's facade to save him. The sacrifice was staggering. The meeting place wasn't Solara Springs. It was neutral ground, a quiet, sunlit conservatory attached to a university research hospital Cassian funded. No mountains, no mist, just the hum of life support systems for exotic plants and the distant murmur of the city. Both arrived separately, guarded. Cassian saw her first. Elara Finch, not Elle Rivers. She wore simple, elegant formals, her auburn hair pulled back severely, no bohemian ease. She looked tired, older, but her green eyes held a new, fierce clarity. Elara saw Cassian Blackwood. The sharp suit, the aura of contained power, the intelligent gray eyes assessing her, no trace of Calvin's awkwardness. But the intensity was familiar. They stood several feet apart, the space between them charged with the weight of everything. The lies, the betrayal, the corporate war, the sacrifice, and the ghost of what they'd shared. "Thank you," Cassian said finally, his voice low and gravelly. "For the evidence. You didn't have to do that." He paused. "Arthur Vanth is finished. Axiom Labs is under federal investigation. Finch Industries will survive, but it's damaged. Severely." Elara nodded curtly. "Arthur was a monster. My mother," she swallowed. "She's contained for now. The scandal limits her options. My engagement is dissolved, publicly." She offered no justification, no plea for understanding. The action spoke for itself. Silence stretched again, less hostile now, but thick with unspoken questions and raw nerves. The conservatory felt impossibly large and far too small. "I keep wondering," Cassian began, choosing his words carefully. "Who was it I found at Solara Springs? Was it Elara Finch playing a role? Or—" he hesitated, the vulnerability terrifying. "Or was it a part of you, the part that hates cages, that values real connection?" Elara met his gaze, her own defenses lowering slightly. "I ask myself the same thing. Was Calvin Reed a mask? Or was he a part of Cassian Blackwood? The part yearning for simplicity? For peace?" She took a tentative step closer. "I saw him. I think you saw her, buried under the lies and the legacies." Cassian didn't move, but his posture softened infinitesimally. "The lies were the framework," he admitted. "But the feelings—" He shook his head, unable to articulate the confusing truth. "The person who leaked that data, that was Elara Finch, but the courage it took, that felt like Elle." A ghost of a smile touched Elara's lips. "And the man who trusted that data, who didn't immediately assume it was another trap, that felt like Calvin. Another step closer." The air hummed with possibility and peril. Trust was shattered. Their worlds were still fundamentally opposed. The road ahead was littered with minefields, corporate, familial, personal. "I'm launching a new venture," Cassian said, the CEO re-emerging, but tempered. "Post-Chimera. Focused on accessible, ethical biosolutions. Clean slate, no Blackwood legacy baggage. Not entirely, anyway." He took a deep breath. "It needs perspective. Someone who understands cages and the cost of freedom. Someone who sees the human element beyond the data." He looked directly at her. "Not as an heiress, not as a spy, but as Elara. The woman who burned down her own gilded walls. Would you consider consulting?" It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a bridge, fragile and pragmatic, built on the only solid ground they had left. Mutual destruction and the faint, undeniable echo of a profound connection. It was an offer to build something new, together, eyes wide open to who they truly were and the scars they carried. Elara studied him, the sharp intelligence, the lingering shadows of Cassian Blackwood's burdens, the tentative hope in his eyes that mirrored her own. She thought of the freedom she craved, not the nomadic fantasy of Elle, but the freedom to choose, to matter for herself. This was a different kind of open road. "Yes," she said, the word clear and decisive. "But not for Finch, not for Blackwood, for the project. And," she added, a flicker of her old spirit returning, "consultants require chocolate croissants during strategy sessions, authentic ones, not that retreat health food mulch." A surprised, genuine laugh escaped Cassian, a sound as rare and precious as it had been at Solara Springs. It wasn't Calvin's awkward chuckle, nor Cassian's cold bark. It was something new. "Authentic chocolate croissants," he agreed, a tentative smile touching his lips. "Consider it a clause in the contract." He extended his hand. "Not for a lover's touch, not yet. For a partnership, for a beginning." Elara looked at his hand, then back at his face, seeing both Cassian and Calvin, the man and the ghost. She placed her hand in his. The touch was firm, cautious, charged with the weight of the past and the fragile promise of a future they would have to build, piece by piece, truth by hard-won truth. They didn't walk into a sunset. They walked out of the conservatory together, side by side, into the complex, uncertain glare of a new day. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with challenges, but they were choosing to navigate it together, no longer masked as Calvin and Elle, but openly, cautiously, as Cassian and Elara, two people forged in fire, ready to build something authentic from the ashes of the Masquerade. The final image was not of a kiss, but of them later, in a sun-drenched lab space, examining a prototype bioreactor. Their conversation was technical, focused, but punctuated by moments of easy silence, and the occasional shared glance that held a world of cautious hope and fierce, hard-earned determination. The work had just begun. Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.